Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Kottabos Space Program, where today we are having a look at Near Future Electrical, which is of course being made by forum user NearT, and is the second part of our four-part little series here of taking a look at all the downloads that make up Near Future Technologies. And if you remember the last episode where we were looking at propulsion, you may remember how much electricity those things use to actually power themselves. It was a lot of energy to get that thrust. And this episode, taking a look at Near Future Electrical, is the answer as to how you produce all that electric charge by giving us a good series of parts ranging from nuclear reactors, more batteries, to even capacitors for you to use. So let's take a look at the VAB and have a gander at all the different parts, and we'll grab ourselves a Mark 1-2 command pod for size comparison's sake, and we'll start in fuel tanks, because of course one of the things we have here is nuclear reactors, and those nuclear reactors will need enriched uranium, which we can store extra of in these three lovely nuclear fuel drums. Now the first one here, the MF1, will hold 960 enriched uranium, and you also see up here that it'll also hold depleted fuel. Starts at 0, but it'll hold a max of 960, and that is an important point that I should already mention here. Basically, when the reactors are working, they will take enriched uranium, and then they will output depleted fuel. And these numbers are the same of the max of 960 on both because it's a 1-to-1 ratio. If a reactor uses 1 enriched uranium, it will spit out 1 depleted fuel. So that's a good thing to remember, especially with a few things we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Now the next one we have is the MF4 nuclear fuel drum, if we pop that up there, and that one will hold just 300 enriched uranium or depleted fuel. And finally the MF7 nuclear fuel drum, which will hold just a tiny amount of 60 enriched uranium or depleted fuel. And let's actually zoom in on these for a second because they are beautiful. Honestly, some of my favorite fuel tanks that I think I've seen in a very, very long time. I just love the look of them. They, especially this one right here, where you've got the... It could have just been a drum with some radiation symbols on it, but instead we have all these nuclear fuel rods inset into the thing, and it's just very beautifully made, very good texturing, very good modeling on all of these parts, and well, that's a common theme with the rest of this mod as well. Now let's dump these and head down to the real meat of the mod, down in electrical, and we're actually going to start by looking at the reactors first, then we'll take a look at batteries and capacitors, etc., and we'll start with the tiniest of the reactors, the MX-EXP Turbo Power Fusion Generator, which will produce 60 electric charge per second by using a very tiny amount of enriched uranium at 0.01 per day. And of course, as I said, 1-to-1 ratio, so it'll output 0.01 per day of depleted fuel. So that's a tiny amount of fuel for a pretty decent amount of electric charge, 60 per second, which you may be wondering, well, that kind of seems a little bit overpowered for something that's that tiny. That is our smallest of the reactors. Make note of that. The others get pretty big. And well, it could be overpowered, except for one fact. All of these reactors produce a lot of heat, a whole heck of a lot of heat, and if you keep them running at maximum capacity forever, well, your Kerbals are not going to be having a very good time. That's one of the fun things with this. It actually does build up a lot of heat, and they have, say, auto shut-off sequences here, so you can choose the temperature at which it will auto shut off, and if you don't want it to produce 100% of the power, you can throttle it down, which will help with the heat. If you just keep it idling at like 10% power production, it's going to use a lot less, and that's a very fun thing to have. Now, the other thing you might note on this is that, well, if we grab another here, our only attachment point was at the bottom. We got nothing on the top. So basically, you'd have to put these at the either beginning or end of your ship, but what if you did want to put it in between? Well, that's one of the fun things about these reactors. I really like this. They can have a changeable structure here, currently set to open, but we can just switch it to top node. And there we go. We have a little superstructure that gets built around the reactor, so we can pop another one on in line, or any other part, which is quite cool. Now, as for the rest of the stats on this thing, it does hold some of its own enriched uranium and electrical charge, so it'll hold 120 electrical charge and a tiny amount of enriched uranium at 11, but remember, 0.01 per day. It's going to last you a very long time. In fact, it has an estimated core lifetime of 5 years, 14 days, 1 hour, and 29 minutes. Yeah, it's going to last your mission a very, very long time, and that's a good thing. So you can, think about that for your various missions, as to what reactor you need, how long you need it to last, etc., and if you'll need, say, some extra fuel from one of these tanks. Alright, so that is the tiny one. Let's move up to the MX4 Garnet, which is the next in size. Again, it does have a open or top node infrastructure that can be built, so you can make this thing in line. I do love that. And this one, well, this one will start producing a lot more energy at now 400 electric charge per second, but only using 3 times as much enriched uranium at 0.03. Now, it does also hold an electric charge of 800 and enriched uranium of 65, so good to remember. Now, the next 2 we have in line, both of which produce the same amount of electricity. We have the Prometheus MX1 and also the MX2 flat fission reactor. So both of these will produce 2,000 electric charge per second, but the flat reactor will spend 0.12 enriched uranium, while the Prometheus will actually spend 0.13. So the flat is a little bit more efficient, but of course is built for a much larger ship design. So just whichever way you want to go. Now, as for other things that they hold, the flat will hold 4,000 electric charge and 350 enriched uranium, whereas the Prometheus does also hold 4,000 electric charge, but only 280 enriched uranium. So just whichever, you want to go with, depending on the size of your ship and need and usage, etc. And whereas the flat is, of course, purely in line, the Prometheus up here also does have a top node superstructure that can be built, which is pretty cool. I do love that thing. And the final one we have is the MXL Excalibur, and this is the biggest of our reactors. And more than just physical size, it will produce a whopping 3,000 electric charge per second by only using 0.19 enriched uranium per day. Now, it'll also hold 6,000 electric charge as well as 400 enriched uranium. It does have that little superstructure, except, of course, since it's technically meant to be down, it's not really top node, it's now just in line. And, well, that's a good thing. And again, just gorgeous modeling, gorgeous texturing on this, and a beautiful, gigantic reactor. Now, of course, you may want to store that power someplace, and, well, we've got some fun batteries here, but yeah, we got some other cooler batteries up this way. In fact, we have 5 batteries. Don't want to forget for some reason I keep forgetting that the B800 exists. I don't know why. But we'll start up here with the B10K, which holds 10,000 electric charge and is meant for, the larger design of ship, and is just big battery. Again, 10,000 electric charge. The next one we have is the B12K, which is made for the 2.5 size variety, but of course is just a giant hunk of battery there, and, well, very useful. We then have the B6K rechargeable battery bank, which holds 6,400. We'll pop that there. And then the B3K holding 2,800, and I really like the look of this one. It just looks like a whole bunch of AA batteries strapped together there. Very fun, very Kerbal. And this one kind of looks like a server rack to me. For some reason. Okay, and the final battery that we do have is the B800 rechargeable battery, which holds 800 and is just a bigger version of basically the Z400. In fact, it's twice the size, roughly. Good times indeed. And these are the batteries we have, which I now need to, reverse gear and backtrack a little because I forgot one generator. Now, these were, of course, the nuclear fission generators, but we also have a new fun RTG down here, or radioisotopic generator. Now, of course, in the game, we already have the PB Nuke, which is a very useful little thing that produces a tiny amount of electricity at 0.8 per second, and now Near Future Electrical adds basically its big brother, the PBAS Nuke, which will create 3 electric charge per second, and as you can see, it is just a much bigger looking design of it, though of course also square rather than round, and overall just a very, very cool little thing. I do enjoy it thoroughly. I've always been a fan of RTGs, so having a bigger one makes me a happy camper. Now, as for the final bit in this tab, we have capacitors. And these are interesting things. I have to admit, I've played around with near future technologies for a long time. I love these mods, but I rarely ever use these capacitors. They are useful things, I just never seem to find myself using them. Basically what they do is they provide an alternative means of electrical storage, especially if you do have, say, RTGs or solar panels that are constantly going, and you already have your batteries filled. Why let that continually created electricity go to waste? So you can put it into a capacitor to save for later. And now these won't get used like a battery does. Basically, the electrical charge that's stored in the capacitors is safe inside the capacitors until you tell them to discharge. Which you may be wondering, well, then why not just add more batteries? And that's because of weight and mass and storage and all those things. These are far more compact and tiny. For instance, the B800. This is a giant hulk of a battery which weighs 0.04 tons and just overall is big, but it will hold 800 electric charge. Now we have the Cap 101 capacitor, which also will hold 800 electric charge, but it's that tiny. It's basically a soda can compared to a 12-pack, and it only weighs 0.005 tons. So you'll hold the same amount of electricity between both of these, but this one is far tinier, and so it does have its use in that regard. And it's a very useful thing, because if you're running low on power because, say, you've been running your engines for a while and you're almost drained, you can then discharge these capacitors and they will fill your batteries. So it's a way of storing extra power in a small form factor, which is quite useful. And now, as for the different ones, we have the Cap 101, as I said, 800. We then have the Cap 106 here, which holds 3,000, and it's basically 3 of them hooked together in a little plank thing there. We then have the Car 8K, which holds, well, of course, 8,000. The Car 1.6K, which holds 1,600, and is a nice little tiny thing. And then finally, the Car Extra Capacitor Bank, which holds, holy crap, 32,000 electric charge. Well, stored charge. It is a different resource that when discharged will go to your batteries to fill them up, and they are beautiful. But like I said, I just never see myself using them very often. For me, typically, I may just put a couple of these onto a ship, just small ones for an emergency, basically, but I never really make much use of them. I probably should, and surely some of you guys out there will get probably a lot more use out of them, because you're probably a bit better at this game than I am, but they are useful tools and will help you in a bind. Now, the final thing we have is down here in utility. This is the last of our parts, and that is the Whirl-a-Jig nuclear reprocessor. And this is a way of maintaining your nuclear fuel. Again, beautiful model and texturing on this thing. Very, very cool. And what it will do is produce enriched uranium by one of 2 different ways. One, it'll either take 1 ore and 200 electric charge per second to create 2.16 enriched uranium per day. So it's going to take a lot of electric charge and a lot of ore to produce the enriched uranium, but you'll get it eventually. But also remember at how tiny amounts the reactors actually use. So there we go. We also have another way of doing it, of using depleted fuel and electrical charge. Now, this will go a lot more quickly than the ore in electrical charge. As you can see here, 0.1 depleted fuel per second and 200 electric charge per second to create 0.05 enriched uranium per second. And this is where things get interesting, because you may be thinking now to yourself, well, we can just create enriched uranium forever. Well, no, because remember, with the reactors, we have the 1-to-1 ratio. We'll have 1 enriched uranium to 1 depleted fuel, but then when you come to here to reprocess it, that ratio is cut in half. 1 depleted fuel in will only mean half a depleted fuel, or 0.5 enriched uranium coming back out. So this is where the loss will happen. Now, it will mean that your missions can be extended for much greater amounts of time, but it won't be perfect forever. Now, of course, if you have ore mining equipment, theoretically, yes, you could stay out there forever as long as you have enough electrical power. And, well, there, oh boy, but then you got your reactors and the balancing act of all of that, so it'll be good times. Now, it does have one more resource that it can convert, and that's xenon. It'll take that same depleted fuel. If you don't want to turn it back into enriched uranium, you can actually take the depleted fuel with 1 per second and 100 electric charge per second to create 1 xenon gas per second, which is quite fun. Now, it will store depleted fuel and enriched uranium at 320 max on both of those, and overall is just a very, very useful tool. Now, let's actually load up a craft here real quick to show some of these things outside. Oh lord, what did I name that thing? Hold on a moment. Oh, I think I just named it. I think I've passed it at least once or twice now. There it is. Yes, I passed it several times. Lovely. So we have our near future electrical ship where we have a couple of capacitors, some nice big batteries, our beautiful giant reactor here, the Excalibur, and I did include the whirly jig down here just for fun, and let's take it out to launch. I mean, I'm probably not really going to show off the whirly jig because it's the same as the standard ore processing units. It's just turning the enriched uranium, or rather the depleted fuel, into enriched uranium, etc. So what we have here is, you know, a lovely little ship that's oh boy, got a lot of battery power and can create a lot of electricity. For instance, if I do just turn on my hyper edit here to take away almost all of our electric charge, and I turn on this reactor just, you know, by right clicking and starting the reactor up here, you'll notice that, well, it's building up. As you can see, now at 200 per second, now at 300 per second, now at 400 per second. It just keeps going up and up and up, and will eventually fill this 24,000 electric charge that I have on here, you know, pretty quickly eventually, but it is of course going to produce some heat in the meantime, which isn't the greatest thing. As you can see, core temperature is at nearly 600K of the max 900K, which is not a good thing. Now, you can keep running it like this and you'll be fine. Let's actually deactivate this reactor, but, well, there's a better way to actually control this thing. You may notice we have some new buttons over here, and that is for controlling your near future electrical stuff. So this button right here will control reactors, and as you can see, it shows my reactor that I have, the MXL Excalibur. I can set its reactor status, and if we watch the power setting here, so this is how much power we want it to produce. Do we want it at 100%? Do we want it at 50%? Or whatever in between? That is your choice. We can also see the heat, the core status here, which is very nice because you can see here the safe temperature range. 900 to 1300 is our safe range for the usage of the nuclear reactor. And we can then change that safe range with this slider right here, and again, it will affect this one here. So you have your two options of how to actually control this thing, and I really love this design because it will show you all of the reactors that you have. So if you have more than one, it's a lot easier to control it from this menu than fumbling around with right-click menus, especially if you have a large ship with like 4 or 5 reactors for a mission. You know, you might be launching a colony and dropping different ones, but on the main mission you got 5 of them attached. All 5 will be here, and a good way of showing that is we also have a capacitor controller right here. And as you can see, I have both of those capacitors on here, the CAR 8K and the CAR 16K. So I can control both of them from right here. Now again, I could right click and control it just the same. We can control the discharge rate as to how fast it fills up the batteries. We can enable recharging or disable recharging if you don't want them to be recharged. And then we can see the capacitor charge that we do currently have in them, which is all useful. And let's actually turn down the electrical charge to show it works. So we're down to about 3,000 or so. And if I say just discharge the 8K, there we go, you can see our electric charge going up while our stored charge is going down. And our 8K one, there we go, excellent. It's filled up quite a bit of our electric charge. In fact, of course, 8,000 of it. And now we do still have a little bit of electric charge in the 1.6K, but we currently still have that stored. Now you'll notice our stored charge isn't going back up, and that's because by default, your capacitors do not recharge. That's why we have this button here, or these buttons here. So I can either manually set the AK to recharge, as I'm doing now, or enable all charging. Or alternatively, if I don't want them recharging, we can disable all or manually click on these. And it's a wonderful tool to have, and the more of these things you have scattered about, more capacitors and more reactors, the easier it is to control these. Now let's actually recharge all here, and we're actually going to need to turn back on our reactor, so we'll just turn it active from here, and watch as our temperature goes up. Now remember, we have a safety status temperature here of 1300, so once it reaches that 1300, being at max 100 reactor status, it should automatically shut off. So we'll just wait for that to come up. And of course, if you were on a long-term mission and you did want to, keep your reactor going for longer, you could adjust how much power you are actually creating. Again, you could drop it from 100 to 50, etc. Just whatever your heart desires for your electrical production. And that, of course, will slow the heat gain on the core. Now we are just about to 1100 now on that, so a little bit longer, and I'm just gonna lower this down to about 1200 or so. Right in there, 1200, so we'll get there in a moment. We're almost to 1200. You can see that this is getting sort of a yellowish brown. There we go. It hit the 1200 mark. In fact, it hit 1210, and it automatically shut it off. This light is no longer on, and of course, this is changed from stop reactor to start reactor, so it has automatically shut itself off for the safety of the ship, and that is a wonderful tool. It means that you can turn these things on and forget about them, and they will turn themselves off so you don't have to worry about your whole ship, blowing up and going to pieces. And that is a wonderful thing. I cannot tell you how many times I've blown up ships because of stupid reasons. And, well, not paying attention to my core heat would be one of those. And yeah, it's just a useful tool to have. I love these little additional menus, as it does make life a lot easier in controlling these. But that is pretty much all I have for showing off a near future electrical today. The only other part, of course, was the whirl-a-jig down here, but as I said, it works the same as the standard ore processing units for making liquid fuel and oxidizer, etc. So you guys will know exactly how to do that, just the same as within the vanilla parts. But that is going to be it for today, folks. I hope you all have enjoyed, and of course that you do come back for the next episode. We'll be looking at part 3 of near future technologies, which is going to be near future solar. So if you don't feel like using nuclear reactors, you can go with the power of the sun, and that is a fun thing. And of course, if you would like to help support the channel, I have started a Patreon campaign recently that you can take a look at the link in the description for that, or of course, link at the end of the video. And also, if you'd like to communicate with the community and myself, we do also now have a Discord server, so you can have a chat with everyone. And yeah, that sums up everything. Again, if you want to take a look at the mod, link in description, as per usual. But that's going to be it for today, folks. I hope you have enjoyed and you do come back for the next, but until that time, thank you for watching. And as always, have a good one.